The National Association of Secondary School Principals released some very interesting data. Did you know that 69% of high school educators say that anxiety and depression is a major challenge? Did you know 73% of school leaders report needing some sort of mental or emotional health support in the last 3 years? Did you know that 1 of 3 school leaders claim their stress level is so high that they have considered a career change during their tenure in their current role? Did you know that 38% of school leaders are looking to leave within the next 3 years, with 14% planning to leave in the next year and 24% planning to leave in the next 2 to 3 years? Did you know that 38% of school leaders say better work-life balance would be the most likely reason to keep them in the profession? This episode of Strictly Education with Dr. Tahira is completely dedicated to health and wellness, the health and wellness of busy school leaders such as you. But not limited to busy school leaders, anyone who's in an executive position that care for others. Oftentimes, we as caregivers care so much for others that we neglect to care for ourselves. My guests for this episode of Strictly Education will be 2 medical professionals and 1 superintendent of schools who's in the field, who is in the trenches every single day. We will tackle the health challenges, the physical health, the emotional health, the mental health of busy school leaders, but we will also identify solutions. Please stay tuned for Strictly Education. Welcome back to Strictly Education with your host, Dr. Tahira. In this episode of Strictly Education, I am so honored to sit with 2 amazing medical professionals and my very good friend, Dr. Piper Bogner, Superintendent of Schools for the Van Dyke Public Schools. Let's get into it. So, as I said earlier, this episode is so focused on health and wellness. Oftentimes, as busy superintendents, principals, school leaders, we spend so much time concerning ourselves with the health, the wellness, and the safety of the people under our care. Most of the times, we neglect our own. So, in this episode, Piper Voge, my good friend, superintendent in Michigan, and we also have with us today Dr. Adwa Aku, who is a clinical psychologist who's done some amazing work in the field of psychology. And we also have the honor to work with today Dr. Alexandra Lewis, who is also a wonderful anesthesiologist. Can't wait to hear from all 3 of these fantastic ladies. So let's get started. I'm going to start with Dr. Bogner, superintendent. How do you define the relationship between a school leader's personal well-being and their effectiveness in their role? You know, we keep hearing the word well-being and we keep talking about that. Just talk about the correlation between the 2.
Sure. Thank you for asking, and thanks for having me today. It's really exciting to be here and talk with all of you wonderful women. This can be very complicated because we know that as school leaders and as any leader in any organization, you really want to make sure that you have a big picture view and that things are getting done efficiently, getting done effectively, and that in a school you're doing the right thing for your students, your staff, and your community. So sometimes what we tend to do as leaders is we tend to not take care of ourselves because we're taking care of other people. What you have to do is you have to make sure that you are going to take care of yourself. If you don't schedule it in, it doesn't happen. You have to make yourself a priority.
Dr. Bogner, you and I have been superintendents for quite some time. We're considered to be seasoned superintendents. You 7 years, right?
Yes.
I'm 10 years. Isn't it selfish to take care of yourself first when we're taking care of other people's children?
Well, that is a really good question. I hit the 7-year mark being a superintendent in my district in February. I've been here 14 years now in Van Dyke Public Schools, and I don't find it selfish when I can come to work, give my best here, and also go home and give the best to my husband, my dog, my family, my friends. you have to, sometimes people don't believe work-life balance exists, but you have to at least try.
So Dr. Bogner used a phrase that is used so often, and I don't know if it's overused. Is it realistic? Work-life balance. What in the world is that? Is that really something that a person can achieve? I'm going to ask you, Dr. Aku.
It really is, but it takes real work. It doesn't happen by happenstance. You have to plan for work-life balance. You have to really know yourself for work-life balance, and then you have to schedule things in. So things like no more emails after 7, right? Something like that can increase your work-life balance, but then you have to set that rule and then you have to stick to it, which is where a lot of people have a lot of difficulty.
So Dr. Bogner, so Dr. Aku gave a really interesting example of shutting the phone down and the emails after 7 o'clock. Is that our reality?
Well, I suppose it could be. That would be really difficult. It'd be hard to let go. But as much as I often say I would like to throw my phone in a river somewhere, you have to set those boundaries, and sometimes you have to turn it off for an hour or two at a time. Think about when you have an emergency where you would have to leave it turned on. And if it's not an actual emergency, it's not an actual emergency. I was speaking with a principal earlier today who just completed their first year, and I said, you'll get better at setting the boundaries as you go on and as you spend more time in the administrative role. You feel like your first year, everything's an emergency. You've got to address everything. Your second year, it calms down a teeny bit.
Yeah.
But 7 years in, 20 years into being an administrator, you know that not everything is an emergency, and not everything can be urgent and important. We know that if we say this is the most important thing, we can only say that once.
Why is it that we're so attracted to these phones and we feel like we have to have them by our sides? What do you think that is? I don't know. Dr. Alexandra, what do you think?
I just feel like we have the need that we have to be plugged in all the time, and we don't have to. So it's actually interesting. So I'm a big believer in going on wellness retreats.
Oh,
So a couple years ago, I started doing it. There's a resort called Miraval, and they have
Yeah.
3 locations. If there's one in Arizona, there's
Right.
one in Austin, and there's also one in the Berkshires.
right.
And it's interesting because when you check in, the first thing they do is they give you a sleeping bag for your phone.
Oh,
And they actually tell you during the whole stay, you're going to put your phone in the sleeping bag and you're not going to touch it. And if there's an emergency, you
Right.
have a little area that you
Sure.
go to.
sure.
But it's amazing how just unplugging yourself and just being focused on yourself and not being pulled in every single direction. So I think it's really important to be able to detach yourself.
Sure.
And I think everyone should do something like that where they take some time, a week, just go away and just say, I'm not going to answer my phone.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
And you'd be amazed at how you leave the week feeling so refreshed, so centered, so present.
So present. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah, I totally agree. But I find that not everyone has the option to take a week,
I know.
right? Which is so wonderful, but you don't have to. You can do that for a few hours,
wow.
right? A few hours if you do it on a regular basis. My Sunday mornings, I go for 2-3 mile walk, 2-3 hour walk, 10 miles. No phone.
Wow.
Just me, walk, nature.
Wow.
And so, and I've worked with people where I've helped them carve out some time. And it doesn't have to be, it's great if you can do a week. I mean, you really feel the difference after a week. But just on a regular basis,
Right.
putting down the phone
Right.
at night, right? 7 o'clock, that's it, no more phone time, read a book.
Right.
Do people remember reading books?
Right.
There's so many other things that we can do, but we get it's not as strong as an addiction. It's a habit. For some people it can be an addiction, but our phones are a habit. We're used to having them. But there was a time, and I think we're all old enough to remember that time when you didn't have a cell phone. You didn't have the cell phone. So what did you do, right?
We talked to each other.
We talked to each other. We had dinner with friends. We went for walks. We played games. There were so many other things to do. All those things are still available. They're all there, but we forget about them because we are now doing them all on our phones.
Right.
And you also even notice your anxiety level. drops precipitously
Yes.
when you're not plugged in all the time.
Right, because we're programmed to, I've got to answer.
respond,
I got to
yeah.
respond. And that's the other thing. We have to give ourselves permission. You don't have to respond.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to, every time the phone rings, you do not have to answer it. Oh, wait. If this is not on the list of people who might really have an emergency, then let it go to voicemail and check the voicemail. If the voicemail indicates an emergency, you can call them back. Right, you can call them back. But if it's not, then you can deal with it later. But we condition ourselves that as soon as the phone rings, we have to answer it. We don't have to answer the phone.
Dr. Alexandra, you talked about the anxiety. What does anxiety do to one's body,
Oh my gosh.
to your physical health?
Ooh, yes.
I mean, honestly, I see it all the time, right? In the perioperative space. People come in and it's just like their blood pressure's through the roof. All of a sudden it's like, they're like, oh, well, my blood pressure is always normal. Well, today it's like 220 over 100. Like,
Wow.
so you can see, hemodynamic changes. Your blood pressure's elevated, your heart rate's elevated, and that's a stressor on the body. Your body's working harder. So those are some of the changes that you would notice
Wow.
with anxiety.
Wow.
And you can imagine being like that in a chronic state can have significant impacts on
Yes.
you. long term.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. So a lot of our audience members are school leaders, and we have leaders and those who are in executive positions from different sectors of the workforce. And so you said, Dr. Aku, that work-life balance is possible. And I believe you because I trust you. You've done amazing work with educators. I've watched you in action, even with educators I lead. I want to ask Dr. Bogner, how do you, or what strategies do you employ to ensure that you have work-life balance?
That's a great question, and our physicians just dropped some beautiful pearls of wisdom. Because even when I put that phone on the charger upstairs and go downstairs for an hour and a half, my anxiety drops exponentially. Sometimes hearing that ding of a text message or an email just can make your entire body tense up. One thing that I tell people is if you're not making the time for yourself, schedule it. Put it in your calendar. I'm a calendar person, and that's something that I will talk with people about as I mentor them, is that you've got to put something in a calendar. Some days I don't even know where I'm going if I don't look at my calendar, and that is the God's honest truth. You've got to schedule it. And your physical health and your mental health that's what you've got as a person. You've got your health. You have love, you have your health, you have a career if you're fortunate, like one that we have that we love, but you have got to take care of yourself. And like I said earlier, I wanted to be the best self for my family. Did I think I had time to go and do therapy sessions once a week or twice a week? No, not off the top of my head, but I scheduled it in and made it happen. Did I have time? Did I think I had time to go and do a bunch of health screenings? No, but what is the alternative? And I know we'll talk probably a lot more about that, but the alternative is nothing that's positive. So you have to schedule it in. And that's my advice to people is schedule that in. There are so many proverbs about, not burning the candle at both ends, or, that you'll burn your own light out so that others can see, something like that. You have to take care of yourself if you're going to help people take care of others, or if you're taking care of others, so you're not suffering something like a compassion fatigue.
Wow, a compassion fatigue. Can you explain to the Strictly Education audience members what is compassion fatigue?
Sure, I think it can manifest itself in many ways, but I also believe that I think educators feel that a lot. I'm sure physicians feel that a lot, and a lot of people in the service industry in general. When you are constantly caring for others and either seeing firsthand or hearing about what they're going through, that's weighing really heavily upon you. As educators, we often say that we take our jobs home, and I know other professions say this too, but we say we take our jobs home. That's why it's not a 9 to 5, or it's definitely not an 8:30 to 3 job. So we take that home with us, and it's draining because we're constantly thinking about what other resource could we provide, what other help could we give, whether that's personally or as a group at our school or in our district. So that is, there's a lot of fatigue when you hear about something where you might be completely helpless when somebody needs something. And you might hear that from 20 people in a day or 50 people in a day, or you might know of 100 cases in a day. It might even be one that's very, very heavy. on a certain day or within a certain week. And that does fatigue you, whether you realize it or not. You might go home thinking about someone in particular, a student or a staff member that you really want to help, or you really feel for them for some reason. And you might be thinking about that, or you might just be exhausted and not realize why.
So, Dr. Aku, is that what Piper Bogner just explained to us? Is that the same as vicarious trauma? Because I've heard the term vicarious trauma. And oftentimes we as administrators, we as busy executives, we feel the trauma of the people who we serve.
Yeah.
We feel that energy. And oftentimes we absorb it and don't even realize that we absorb it. You know, is that the same thing that she's explaining?
There's an overlap.
There's an overlap.
Yes, compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma. Trauma, there's a big overlap. So when you are dealing with people, but the compassion fatigue is not just the trauma part, because you can have compassion fatigue when a student's doing very well, but they're still taking energy, right? So doing good things can take energy as well. So all of it contributes to compassion fatigue, just doing everything. However, vicarious trauma is really when you are exposed a lot to other people's trauma. So it's not something that directly affects you, but we are, as human animals, we are made with mirror neurons in our brains, right? Because we are connected, we're communal. And so it helps empathy to be able to kind of imagine someone else's challenges, right? That's how our brains are wired. However, when you are imagining the traumas of so many people, right, then that causes stress in your mind and your body. And that's what leads to compassion fatigue if you don't do something about it, right? So you have to have ways to let that stress go so that it doesn't accumulate. It's the accumulation of taking on other people's stress that causes the fatigue.
It's actually interesting you say that, that you named it those terms, because I've been through, as a physician, having lived through the Boston Marathon bombing. Like, I was on call that night when it happened.
Wow.
And having to see all of this trauma coming in all at once. And it was the first time that I'd ever been exposed to that. And then I've had patients, who I've developed really strong bonds with in the cancer space who've passed away.
Yes.
And it's amazing how that can disrupt your sleep patterns. I've had experiences where, 2 weeks I've gone without sleeping, like like just up, nervous, worrying. I just can't get a restful sleep because I've absorbed all of that trauma.
I've never heard a physician say that. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And I imagine everyone to some degree has it. Obviously, probably not to the extent that I've experienced it firsthand, but it can really disrupt your sleep.
Yes.
And if you're not sleeping well, you're also not going to be able to perform.
Exactly.
So I've done a lot of work in terms of, meditation, yoga, exercising. Those are ways to kind of just reground myself, because it really can have a major issue in terms of your mental health.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've never heard that. And oftentimes we think that our physicians are
Resilient.
Invincible.
invincible.
Yeah.
These are people who they don't have the feelings.
Oh, no, the feelings
and that so there is a myth that you all are taught how to not, empathize with your patients, right? And that this is a business. So I've never heard anyone put it in those terms. So thank you for just sharing that. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, obviously a lot of this happened early on in my training, and over time you kind of learn how to manage your emotions.
Sure.
Yes.
But over time, it does, those things stick with you.
Of
So you
course.
have to be able to manage it.
Of course. And you work with New York City Police Department and the hostage negotiator team.
Yes.
Like, I can only imagine what you absorb from those who you train. Can you just talk about that?
I train with both the hostage negotiator team and the emergency response team. So the emergency response team, that's the first team that comes when someone falls in the subway, in the tracks, horrible things like that. And I teach them about negotiation, how to work with people when they are in an acute state of emotional distress. And especially how to work with people who have mental illness when they're in that state so that they can use words, right? To try to keep people safe, keep themselves safe, and keep the person that's in distress safe. Because it's very scary when you don't understand what's going on with somebody and they are emotionally very distressed. It can be very scary for the police officers to deal with it. So I make sure they understand what's going on so that they can recognize and alter their communication and use communication to try to keep themselves and the person safe, to get them to the hospital, to get them someplace for help.
And oftentimes when there's an emergency situation, we don't think that the police officer, the firefighter, the emergency rescue individual is also afraid.
Yes.
And also dealing
Yes.
with anxiety and dealing with
Exactly.
stress.
And when you are afraid, when your anxiety goes up, you can't think as clearly. And if you can't think clearly, right, you go into fight, flight, freeze mode, and you're ready to protect yourself. Right? But if you understand that this person is really not a danger to you, but they are suffering a mental illness, then that can help you relax and think clearly and try to help them and not worry as much about your safety. So that's what I teach them. And I want to address something that's related to this that you said earlier, is that superintendents, police officers, medical professionals, right? Don't think it's selfish, right? They think it's selfish to take care of themselves. It is so important to understand that self-care is not selfish. It is crucial. And my favorite example of this is the airplane. We've all been on airplanes where the flight attendant does the demonstration and says, put the oxygen mask on yourself first before anyone else. Why is that? Because if you pass out, you can't help anyone else. It's the same thing in everyday life, right? If you are incapacitated, however that happens, then you can't take care of all the students in your district. Right? You can't take care of your patients. So it is absolutely not selfish. It's actually selfless to take good care of yourself so you can keep doing whatever you do and do it to the best of your ability. Because if you're falling apart, then you might be showing up every day, but you're not showing up as your best. Now, if you put the phone down at 7 and take an hour away from the phone, you show up better. Right? If you so many people push through and don't sleep, right? Because you need to get this done. But the reality is, and research shows this, that if you get decent rest, you actually are more efficient.
Of course.
So you come back and you do the job. So the same job that's taking you 8 hours, if you get to a good night's rest, it might take you 4. Right? But we don't think that way. So it's so important for us to change the way we think. And put self-care first. And then we'll do everything else better and be healthy and enjoy it while we're doing it.
You know, my friend Dr. Bogner talked about putting her phone on the charger upstairs and going downstairs and feeling relaxed, right? I will admit, I am addicted to my cell phone. I have aging parents, a child on the other side of the world, right? And you know, there's so much going on in a school district that I feel obligated to always be there for. But I will admit, one day, I left the house and I left my cell phone.
Wow.
And I was stressed for about 5 minutes. I mean, stressed. Like, I didn't think that I could function. I was like shaking, like, oh my God, my cell phone, what am I gonna do? And then all of a sudden, there was a feeling of calm that came over me. And Piper, I was good. And I said, you know, I was good. And I said, I'm going to leave the cell phone. It was such a different experience for me without my phone.
Since then, have you?
No. Great question.
It was a good one. And it was by accident.
Great feeling.
Exactly. But it felt really good. I just have to be bold enough to do that again and do that more often, like maybe on a Sunday.
And just you can do it for a few hours. Again, it doesn't have to be all day. You can start with a few hours. You can start with, you know, even if you need to let them know.
I know.
I'm going to put my phone down. I'll be back. Like, give yourself that permission.
But you know what's tough for me? And, you know, I don't know if any of you are going through this as well. I have aging parents. And I'll never forget in January 3rd to be exact, my parents were calling me at 3 o'clock in the morning because my dad had taken a fall. And my ringer was off. And they kept calling me and calling me and calling me.
And I never want to be in a situation where a family member needs me and I'm not available. So it is hard for me to let it go. And I am learning to rely on other family members.
Yes.
I'm learning.
That's the other
I'm learning.
thing. We
I'm
think
learning.
we think we have to do everything.
Yes.
Yes, we do.
And
especially as women, like we carry the weight of the world on our shoulders.
exactly.
And we always feel like we have to be there for everyone at every time, right?
Yes,
Right?
for everything.
For everything, right? And we don't. And so I have learned to say, from this time to this time, I'm going to not be available and rely on other family members. But that day was so hard for me because they were calling me for about 2 hours and they couldn't reach me. And all I kept thinking was my helpless parents needed me and I wasn't there. That was hard. And so I'm struggling with letting go and unplugging. And while I can be the host of this show and the, great superintendent and say, yeah, model the behavior and I know it's the right thing to do, I'm working on it. I'm working on unplugging.
And this is where one of the things that I think is so important, and I think everybody should do it, is going to therapy is really helpful. Like, this is the kind of thing where I would help somebody work through that and set up a system. And it takes time because you have to deal with, maybe parents just think to call you for 2 hours. Is there nobody else that they called, right?
No, everybody wants a superintendent, right? Dr. Bogner?
Exactly.
Everybody wants a superintendent. They're not going to call anybody else.
So part of the process might have to be then having that conversation with mom and dad, and who else can you call? If they're aging and everybody knows, then setting up a system where other people are checking it, like
Support system.
exactly. But that takes thought and it takes work, and those are some of the things that I work with people on. Kind of once we identify, okay, this is the stressor, this is the issue. Now we have to put plans in place, and we have to try different things and tweak them until we find something that is realistic, that's workable, and it takes some time and effort.
All right, I cannot be the only person watching this show, or I'm not watching, I'm hosting, but the only person who just heard what you said. You mean to tell me someone can go to therapy for just unplugging their phone? Because when I think therapy,
Yeah.
Dr. Bogner, right? When I think therapy, Dr. Alexandra, I think because I'm having mental health challenges, I'm having a breakdown, or I'm dealing with some sort of trauma, some sort of stress, some sort of anxiety, perhaps mourning, grief. I never thought to change my behaviors requires therapy. That's really interesting that you said that.
It doesn't require it, but it's a lot more efficient. If you have somebody helping you do these things, it's a lot more efficient. And that's part of the stigma that keeps people from coming to therapy, is this idea that I must be at the breaking point, I must have a mental illness. But the reality is, especially now, I'm only doing virtual work now, is all of my clients are healthy, well-functioning adults that need support. And everybody deserves support. And so I did a lot of support because of COVID with physicians, because physicians were experiencing more burnout. And sometimes it's that extreme, but it doesn't have to be that extreme. And you know what? It's so much better if you come to me before it's that extreme. So we can keep it from getting that extreme. So if we were to work on something like setting up a better system for your family, then it wouldn't get to the point where you are burnt out. And that is what would be better, healthier for everyone, but that's not how mental health is used. And unfortunately, that's not how insurance companies,
That's a whole nother show.
a whole nother show. Exactly.
That's a whole
Another
other
show.
show.
Yes.
But now we're going way off topic, which is perfectly fine, because going to the two of you has stigma. Visiting the doctor, visiting a psychologist. And I'm just going to be honest, visiting a psychologist, like, is something wrong with me? Or do I only go to a physician because there's something wrong with me? What are some of the wellness checks that busy executives such as Dr. Bogner and myself, even you, what are some of those checkups that we really should not overlook?
Oh, man.
And I'm going to tell you, my audience,
There's like a whole list.
my audience is 40 and above.
Yeah.
Busy,
Yeah.
well educated, multiple degrees. What do you got? Like 4 degrees, Piper?
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
I think 4.
So the average superintendent has like 4 or 5 degrees.
Yeah.
We're well educated.
Yeah.
But we're afraid of you. We're definitely afraid of you. We're afraid of you. Because we don't want to hear what you're going to say to us.
I just put people to sleep, okay?
Right.
What I will tell you though is, having a really good relationship with your primary care physician, because they're that touch point, right? They're going to be the ones to refer you to specialists if things pop up. Obviously, I'm probably most comfortable in the cancer space, but cancer screening. More and more younger people actually are coming down with cancer. And so, talking to your physician and understanding when is that time to start getting screened is really important.
So I did something a little bold. And I remember my physician saying to me, because I'm at this certain age, Dr. Bogner, right? So I'm at that certain age,
Yes.
right? And so my physician said to me, it is time to, have your colonoscopy. And we scheduled it. And I said, okay. She says, I'm going to do the referral. And I said, okay. So I got the call. Okay, we're going to prep. And I'm like, you know what? I think I need to postpone it. All right, we're going to give you a new date. New date came. I got the call, the call that you get to remind you. I got the call and I said, I got a meeting. And so I can't miss this meeting. So I'm going to postpone. Did it again. My dad has a doctor's appointment. I need to take him. Postponed it again. But I finally did it. And I am here to tell everyone it was not a horrible process of getting my colonoscopy. Hearing the great news that I don't need to see you again for another 7 years. I think people fear the process. People fear probably what they think they might hear. And I think people fear what they don't really know about it and the importance of it. So I did it. And I'm going to take my Strictly Education viewers through my process. And what I'm hoping is that this will inspire some of them to begin to make their appointment for their colonoscopy, and especially if they are age 40, 45 and above.
Yeah, I would even say 40.
40.
At this point.
Right, it used to be age 50.
Yeah.
So now it's age 40.
Yeah, it's younger and younger, actually.
So what does this colonoscopy tell us?
Yeah, so
Cancer screening.
It's really going to identify if you have polyps, and obviously if you have, if they do see a polyp, they can sometimes extract it, and then they may refer you to come back in a shorter time frame. So it might be a year, it might be 5 years. A lot of it, you'll have to have a conversation with the gastroenterologist.
Right.
But that's the big thing. And obviously, if it's cancer, then that's a whole different route that you're going to have to take in terms of treatment.
So as busy as I am, I'm in the panini age where I'm sandwiched with my own family, my work, and also with the aging family members and everything else in between. If I can do it, I think anyone who's watching this show can do it as well. So everyone, take a look at my journey. Okay, so I am 3 days away from my colonoscopy. It's scheduled for Wednesday, and so there are some products that I had to purchase to prep for it. So I have the Miralax, I have the stool softener, and of course I have Gatorade, and of course I got 0 sugar Gatorade. I have to mix all of this together the day before, which is Tuesday, the night before, and start drinking this at 4 p.m., which you'll see shortly. And the Gatorade will help to replenish the electrolytes that I am going to lose as a result of prepping for the colonoscopy. So let's see what happens. All right, Strictly Education fans and viewers, I am here at the hospital about to undergo a colonoscopy. Yesterday, I went through the prep, and I have to tell you, despite what people say, the prep really wasn't that bad. I had to ingest the mixture and let nature take its course to clean my colon so that the doctor can have a clear picture of what's happening in my colon. Again, it's a minor inconvenience for a life-saving measure.
I am now in the waiting area. As you can see, I am all adorned, prepared for my colonoscopy. All of my vitals checked out beautifully. My glucose level is at 90. My blood pressure is like a teenager. Everything checked out well. The anesthesiologist just came in and gave me the okay. We are ready to go. I have this in preparation to receive my anesthesia so that I can be sort of like Twilight as this procedure takes place. The procedure, I was told, is about 20 to 30 minutes, so I look forward to hearing positive results, and I will hear from you soon. And again, it's really not that bad, but it is a life-saving measure. This might seem a bit much, but it's probably one of the best decisions I could make for my own health and also to ensure that I will be around for my family. All right, so the doctor who's going to perform the colonoscopy just left the room to talk to me a little bit about the procedure. And what she said, it's a routine procedure. And if there is any visibility of polyps, and polyps are those precancerous cells, she explained to me, they will remove them. And usually that's typical. And she said they're very tiny, they're very small, and they'll remove them during this procedure. However, if there's something larger, then of course it would have to go to lab. So I am all ready for this. I feel really optimistic. In fact, I know it's going to be positive results. I think the care here is just wonderful and they're gentle. This is my first colonoscopy, and it will help to diagnose if you have anything that needs to be addressed. You know, oftentimes we ignore symptoms. Oftentimes, especially as busy educators, we're so busy taking care of so many other people, taking care of the world, taking care of other people's children, and we spend less time taking care of ourselves. This will hopefully ignite others to think about taking better care of yourself. I'm allowing myself to be vulnerable by bringing you all into my procedure, and I'm hoping that I am inspiring others to take stock in your own health. All right, so they're getting ready, they're getting the room ready for me. I can't take you all into the room with me, but when I wake up, I will let you know the result. All right, Strictly Education viewers, I survived the colonoscopy. It's all over. I'm in the recovery room. My blood pressure is 120/75. So I'm doing pretty well. My heart rate's a little high, 94, because of anxiety. That is normal. Things seem to have gone well. I'm in recovery. I'm having graham crackers and a little something to drink, just to replenish my supply. All seem to have gone well, and I will be going home soon. I survived it. I did it. I'm still hooked up to a couple of things in my blood pressure machine, but as you know, I'm doing well. I survived. I will be going home soon. Can't wait to have a meal today, and I will be at work tomorrow. All right, I am on my way to eat the sloppiest hamburger I can actually find and some French fries. I know it wasn't recommended for me to eat this after a colonoscopy, but I am famished. All right. I'll have a grilled chicken salad. But the doctor just told me I got a clean bill of health, and guess what? I don't have to come back for another 7 years. Guys, you can do this. If I can do this, you can do it. And I can't stress upon this more. Set policies in your school district to allow staff, including yourself, to go for cancer screening. I am so thrilled with this report. I think I'm going to celebrate and treat myself to something nice, more than food, something really nice. Take care. See you in Strictly Education.
All right, so that was my experience. Again, it wasn't a horrible experience. It wasn't a terrible experience. It was an experience that I'm going to encourage all of my busy executives to make time for your wellness, because if you don't make time for your wellness, you'll be forced to make time for your illness. And so I make sure to make time for my wellness. I'm going to ask my good friend Piper Bogner a question. Piper, you are an amazing school leader. You're doing fantastic work in the Van Dyke Public Schools. Of course, we watch each other and cheer each other on LinkedIn and social media. And I'm so proud of you, and I'm proud to even call you my friend. You consistently and persistently are under pressure as a superintendent. We all are. We're responsible for other people's babies, for other people's children. And we don't get to prioritize our wellness the way we should. We don't. We try, but we don't. And there may have been times during our career where we really didn't. I know for me, there was a time in my career where I really did not prioritize my wellness, and it took a major surgery and almost losing my life to really look at things much differently in terms of my wellness. Do you have an instance or a time where you can share with us where perhaps you wasn't as focused on your mental or physical wellness and it impacted you?
I absolutely can think of at least one. Tahira, I'm proud to call myself your friend. Also, I think you do amazing work for your school district and for the families that you serve.
Thank
And
you.
It's great to be able to call you my friend.
Thank you.
We are definitely put under pressure every day, and some of that I know we put upon ourselves. I love my career. This is definitely one of love, compassion, and passion. And with that does come that sometimes uncanny need or want or urge to put everyone before ourselves at every point and every day. I was at a point 5 years ago now where I was not taking care of myself, was not making myself a priority. 5 years ago, at 46 years old, I had a heart attack. Wow. And of course, it snuck up on me because that's what heart attacks do. I did not know that I was primed or ready for a heart attack. I thought I was eating healthy and I was not exercising as much as I should have been. And I was also very stressed. I was giving all of myself to my job, my
Wow.
career, my love,
Wow.
my passion of educating and taking care of other people's children and my staff also.
Right.
But I definitely paid for that, and it immediately took me away from the job for as short of an amount of time as I would allow. I remember asking my cardiologist if I could just go into work on Monday, and this was Saturday night when I was in the hospital.
Wow.
And he said absolutely not, that I had things to do. So I'm sure there's somebody watching who can probably relate to that. Can I just go in and get a couple things done, and then I'll go home and rest? But would I have gone home to rest? Probably not. Mm-hmm. So that's something that definitely slowed me down. And I think that making myself and my health a priority after that, it wasn't just easier, it was necessary.
It wasn't just easy, it was necessary. I started off by telling you all how I had to change based on an experience I had having to have major surgery, multiple hours. And I'll never forget waking up from anesthesia. You weren't my anesthesiologist.
I know.
Well, anesthesiologist. You weren't that. You weren't that. But from waking up from anesthesia and the surgeon looking over me, saying, "I almost lost you." And all I kept thinking was my kids would not have their mom. That's all I kept thinking. But before then, my physician had to almost force me to have this surgery, this life-saving surgery. Had to force me because it was during the pandemic, Dr. Alexandra. It was during the pandemic. And all I kept saying, Piper, and you know this, I need to be there for my school district. I have to be there. This is the most challenging time in the history, in our history, right? And I needed to be there, and I needed to be there. And my physician allowed me to rant, allowed me to just keep going and said, I need you at the hospital at this time, and I need you to be there, right? And then it was that experience that just changed how I work, changed how
Thank goodness.
right? Because had I not done this, I probably would have lost my life. But, it's, we're sharing, both Piper and I, and I'm gonna call you Piper. Piper and I, decided to share this not to garner pity. We don't want that. Like, we're accomplished women. Like, we know what we're doing. We don't need that. We're well established in what we do. But what we're hoping is that there are other busy leaders, and not just school leaders, right? Like executives who are so busy, who are in this panini age, who are just doing so many different things, and just take an assessment of their wellness, of their health. What is it that I have to do? I asked you, what are some of those, checkups that are necessary? The colonoscopy, go to the dentist, go get your physical examination. There's nothing wrong with seeing a nutritionist. Like, this is why we have health insurance, right, Piper? This is
Absolutely, and I know that I am privileged to have health insurance, but if you have the health insurance and you have the means, have all of the screenings. If for some reason you don't have the health insurance or don't have the means, ask someone who might be able to help get you the resources to at least have your major health screenings. Cholesterol, blood pressure, you can get those done at places that will do them for free. I mean, checking your blood pressure regularly can be something that helps you combat having a heart attack. You know, same thing that Tahira said. I might not be here today if I hadn't have gone to the ER, and women have different symptoms. So my symptoms were my stomach really hurt and I was very nauseous. So I did not know. I did not have any chest pains. I have never had chest pains. And I had 2 surgeries. So these are things that, you know, we just need to think about and make sure we stay on top of it. And I completely agree. I don't want an ounce of pity from anyone.
No.
I just want somebody to be healthier if I tell my story.
So Dr. Lewis, she said she didn't feel chest pain. I thought a heart attack, you feel chest pain or you feel this pain down your arm.
Yeah, those are the classic symptoms, mostly in men.
Is that
Men,
right?
yeah, men will have like they'll come to the ED saying they feel like an elephant sitting on their chest. It's crushing pain that radiates down their left arm. That is the classic thing. If you go into a medical textbook, that is how the clinical presentation is. But for women, entirely different. A lot of women do, just like how you said, you presented with nausea, that's actually a very common symptom in women. So
I
you
need
really
for
have
the
to listen to
ladies who are watching this to pay attention.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is, you know, we're women in general, we carry so many different roles, right? You're so busy that you think, oh, it's just a little nausea, you know, maybe upset stomach. You're just completely going to dismiss and keep going and doing what you're doing. So you really have to be to listen to your body and make sure that you're tapping in and again, going to your screening, following up with your PCP, making sure that you're checking your blood pressure on a regular basis so that you can avoid incidents like that.
Wow. You know, this conversation is so important. Why is it that we have to normalize having the conversations about health, wellness, mental health? What do you think, Dr. Aku?
I think that it's our system here in the U.S. that puts this focus on you have to be sick, then we're going to deal with the symptom. We're not going to look at the underlying cause. Where there are other systems in the world where they focus on people being healthy, right? And that's the focus, that we want to prevent illness as opposed to address illness, and right? We want to prevent illness.
Preventive.
And that is not our system. We don't have a preventative system. If we did, then there would be mental health checkups as well as other checkups, right? People should come in, you know, once a year and just kind of check in and talk and see if there is anything that they might want to address that they don't even realize. But I don't have that kind of system here.
It's very reactionary.
Yes.
And then also just, I think, work culture, right? Like I know even within my system, you know, you take a day off and you call out sick and oh my gosh, it's like taboo. Like, oh my God, I can't believe you called out sick. Like we're having staffing shortages. And I'm like, at the end of the day, you know, when I talk to my family about what I do, they're like, listen, you could drop dead tomorrow and they're gonna find somebody else to fill that position.
That is correct.
So you better focus on you.
That is so correct. And Piper, you know, if something happens to us, oh my God, people will be fighting to sit in their seats, right? And the next day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some might.
Exactly. Exactly. Wow, that's really interesting. We talked about preventive care. So, Piper, and I'm just going to ask you because we have a lot of school leaders who are watching. What policies or practices can a district, you know, put in place to ensure a healthy staff, a healthy student body, you know, a healthy school community? And what are you doing in Van Dyke?
Well, in Van Dyke, we do a few things. I really do try to model, meaning I don't send emails or anything that I expect a response to in the evenings or on the weekends, unless it truly is an emergency. You know, if there's a community event that's an emergency and something happens that might affect one of our students or families, we will all get in touch with each other and mobilize where we have to. But that's, of course, an extreme situation. I don't expect... I let all of the administrators know and ask them to let their staff know so that it kind of trickles to everyone that nobody should be expected to have to respond to families 24 hours a day. We have actually put something in our contract for the teachers that's called the right to disconnect. so that when they leave the school building, and at a certain time, and if they would like, they could put it in their email signature or on their, we use Aptigee Rooms, they can put it there, that they have the right to disconnect. They will not be answering email until they return to school the next day. If we do have a inclement weather day, we're in Michigan, so snow days, something like that, that there will be a written policy of how the principal contacts them, whether that's through text message or then we still have one school that likes to do the actual phone call.
Oh boy, the
So
phone tree.
They have to, they have to be alerted that may be how they're going to be reached on their disconnect time. If we do an inclement weather day, but they have that right to disconnect right in the contract. And we've kind of gotten into our wellness policy.
Yeah.
I'm planning some wellness professional learning this school year coming up. So we are trying to put things into place to say how important that is. And really the pandemic showed us that there is so much more to work and we could do things very differently.
Yeah. So, Piper, those are great strategies that you're using in Van Dyke. You know, at Westbury School District, we prioritize social emotional support, not just for our scholars, but also for our staff and our faculty. That's really, really important. We've had the pleasure of having Dr. Aku come to teach us some strategies in dealing with stress and anxiety. We hired a dedicated psychotherapist in our school district who worked with each school to help manage and cope with stress, and not just for our scholars, but also for our staff and faculty. We've designated a day for just social emotional support. In fact, we just had SEL Day at our school district, and it was just amazing when we prioritize health. We now have a health center built into our high school where students will get free healthcare. Where we have teamed up with Harmony Healthcare. They have been doing amazing work where they provide all sorts of health services right there at our high school. And it's 5 days a week, even during the summer. And it's provided for our scholars. So there's quite a few things that we're doing. I'm very proud that we also have in place cancer screening, and we allot time for our staff to go for cancer screening. So that colonoscopy that I took, I didn't have to use it because we were off that day anyway for Eid. But if a staff member needs to go during, you know, the academic day, during the contractual time, they are allowed time to do that. But I'm going to take a few things that Piper shared with me, and that's one thing superintendents do. We borrow from each other, right? And we share.
We're very good at that.
We're very good at that. And I like some of the things that she has in place. So I'm going to reach out to you after the show to hear more about what it is that you're doing, because I think that it also can work very, very well in my school district. You know, I think that'll be great.
I agree. Van Dyke may do some creative stealing from Westbury also.
Yeah, that's what we do. That's what we do. You know, Dr. Lewis, this is such a heavy topic. And it's not a topic that you hear a lot when it comes to educators. We talk about strategies, we talk about learning loss, we talk about, you know, students learning and building teacher capacity, but we don't talk a lot about our mental, physical health. Why are these conversations so important?
Man, I mean, it's just like we were talking earlier about, you know, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others. I'm not sure why we're not having more of these conversations. I mean, just the fact that we've been able to sit here and gather together, it's just been amazing, just the exchange. And I only wish that there would be more conversation like that. So yeah, I mean, I think, you know, mental health, physical health, important. There is that mind-body connection that is so critical. Like I said, you know, when your sleep is impacted, you're not going to be able to perform at work. You know. I know that when I was in a very stressful time, and I actually started picking up yoga, and I actually realized that just breathing in general, like how we breathe, tells a lot about our mental state. So one thing I noticed when I was at work is that I would do a lot of shallow breathing when I was anxious. And because I started doing yoga, I started to pick up on that. And I'd be taking care of a patient and I'm like, and then I'm like, whoa. And then I would just take a deep breath, and it was such a difference. It was such a difference in how I approached taking care of that patient. Just taking that moment to realize, whoa, I'm not in the right mental state. And just breathing was able to get me back, ground me, so that I could actually deliver good care. So yeah,
You taught us the breath square.
I taught us the
Yes,
breath
you
square.
did.
Yes. And I did a lot of that, especially during the pandemic, working with physicians who were on the go constantly and barely had time to use the bathroom. But I would suggest when you take that break to go to the bathroom, take 1 extra minute and breathe deeply at least 4 times. 4 deep breaths can start so to explain this, and I'll do my short explanation, but I do like this whole explanation for people to understand how stress works in the body. Basically, what stress does is it activates the fight, flight, and freeze system. Right? That system in our bodies that's made to protect us. If a big angry bear were to come running in this room right now,
Right.
we have to do something.
Right.
And we don't have time to think, ooh, should I run? Should I, hide and stay still? Maybe the bear won't see me, or should I try to fight this bear? If we stop to do all that thinking, we'd be bear dinner. No doubt about it. So our brains are wired in an emergency to shut down the thinking process and go right into instinct. Right? So that's why when in traumas, things, accidents, people say, next thing I know, right? Because they weren't thinking about it. The problem with our beautiful, wonderful brains is this same great brain does not treat reality. It treats bear attacks just like it treats many other things, like a big exam, right? We've all had to take really big exams to get our licenses and so forth. That big exam can feel just as life-threatening in our brains as a bear attack.
Is that anxiety?
That's what exactly,
Okay.
right? So that's stress, right? In one level you say it's stress and then it moves up to anxiety, but all of those states, any huge emotional state, stress, anxiety, anger, can activate the fight, flight, and freeze system. That system is meant to be a short-term system, right? That's why zebras don't get ulcers. And that's actually the name of a book. But that's why they don't, because it's going to happen for a minute maybe, and then either they're going to be food or they're going to get away. But in our world, in our life, it can be a long-term thing. And it's the long-term activation of the fight, flight, and freeze system on some level. It doesn't necessarily have to get to the point where you totally are not thinking. But that activation is what stresses the body. That exacerbates any medical condition you're dealing with, right? It doesn't cause, as far as we know, medical conditions, but it exacerbates. It increases the severity, intensity, makes it harder to heal. It exacerbates.
Wow.
The only part of the fight, flight, and freeze system that we have conscious control over is the breath. We can't control how fast our hearts are beating. When our hearts beat faster in order to get blood to our system so we can run, right? We can't control all the other things in our body that happens in the fight, flight, freeze system, but we can control our breath. So when we take deep breaths, what we are in effect doing is we're telling our mind and our body, no emergency here. You can calm down. And it takes usually, I find, at least 4 deep breaths to really start to deactivate the fight, flight, and freeze system and to activate the calming system. And these systems don't really they can't be going at the same time. So this is something that even superintendents can do, is to stop and take 4 deep breaths. When we did the breath square, it takes a minute. I've timed it.
Yeah.
It takes a minute.
Right.
But 4 deep breaths takes even less than a minute. And it's something that you have available. It's free. You can do it anytime, any place.
Yeah.
And it can really help reduce that stress because your stress keeps building, right? Every new phone call, every emergency, it keeps going up. But if you are bringing it down along the way, it's going to keep climbing, but you are helping your body and your mind by reducing it. And you can do that with just 4 deep breaths. It's a place to start.
Wow. So that's some great advice. And in close,
is.
right? Isn't that great advice?
I love that. And it takes me back. Apologies for not remembering who brought up the oxygen mask analogy. But this reminds me of that. With students, we always say Maslow before Bloom. If your body's not prepared to learn, your mind will not be either.
Right.
And I'm not sure why we don't always take that to the next level with adults. If we're not prepared to be at work, we're not going to do well at work, whether that's a staff member, one of our building leaders, one of us as superintendents or a CEO somewhere, even physicians, I'm hoping you're taking care of yourselves too. So we need to apply that. We put so much effort into, like Dr. Chase Dupree was saying, we have social workers for our students. We have mental health support there. why haven't we always put those resources there for the adults in education?
That is so true. I'm going to go back to the statistics that I shared earlier. 69% of high school educators say anxiety and depression is a major challenge. 73% of school leaders report needing some sort of mental and or emotional health support in the last 3 years. I think we know why. Right? One of three school leaders claim their stress level is so high that they've considered a career change during their tenure in their current role. 38% of school leaders are looking to leave within the next 3 years. 14% planning to leave in the next year. 24% planning to leave in the next 2 to 3 years. 38% of school leaders say that work-life balance would be most likely to keep them in the profession. These statistics are real. This came out of the National Association of Secondary School Principals. We're talking about reliable data. We, Piper and I, know people who are stressed beyond belief. But I have a question before we end. Is there something called hidden stress? Is that true? Hidden stress, where, and I'll tell you where it came from. Not realizing that you're stressed, or pretending that you're not stressed, but you're really stressed.
Yeah. Yes. In that case, I hadn't heard that term before, but definitely we have normalized. So even think about the pandemic. For a minute during the pandemic, we were talking a lot about mental health and stress. And now that's starting to go away. We're going back to, you have to be crazy to see somebody like me. So we don't want to look at the fact that we're stressed. We have normalized it, like everybody's supposed to feel that way. No, everybody's not supposed to feel that way. This is not, it's a short-term system to get us safe. This is not how we should be feeling. But if we normalize it, if everybody makes it sound from the time, we're children, we're doing some education, but then kids go home to parents that are stressed and are normalizing it. And that's what they believe. And they grow up in a system, right, where our education system, where you're supposed to, work yourself like crazy during internships.
You're spread thin.
Exactly.
Well, let's talk about your schedule.
I mean, my schedules were crazy.
It is nuts. You showed me Dr. Lewis a
ridiculous.
screenshot of her calendar. She was like, here's my calendar, you schedule the show. And I'm like, how do you even, how do you have a work-life balance with the schedule that you have?
I mean, it's shocking, actually. So actually, during the pandemic, I actually decided to go back to school. So I was actually, after COVID, decided to get an MBA. So I was working and I was going to school, and then decided to start working on a business. And so now it's just like this, I do at times feel like I'm stretched thin. But again, it's about finding that time and scheduling that time for yourself. That is like the biggest thing that you can do for yourself.
And it's not selfish.
It's
not selfish.
No, absolutely not.
No, it's not.
It's
It's not selfish.
No, and work-life balance looks different for everybody. So being really, really busy, but then you said you take like 2 weeks off, and then go to a retreat, right? So that is balance if that's what's working for you.
Yeah.
And so it looks different for different people. Some people, I usually try to take one day off a week. One day where I can just move at my own pace, at my own schedule, relatively. I still have to pick a child up from school, but I have a lot more freedom in that one day. Try not to schedule appointments or anything like that in that one day. That works for me. Right? I don't have, at this moment, I can't take 2 weeks off. But it depends on different people in your life at the moment. But it's about figuring out what does work for you. And making sure then you do it.
And that you do it.
And doing things that you love.
That's the other
Doing
thing.
things that you love.
I find that it's really important, and this is what I work with, the clients I work with, once a week at least, you should be doing something that brings you full joy. That's just because you love it, right? If that's reading a book, if it's engaging in a hobby, for me it's going for these crazy long 10-mile walks, but just something that brings you pure joy, that you're not trying to sell, that has nothing to do with your career, just something you love, because that is part. Life is too short, as you two know, right? You almost lost your lives. Life is too short to not do the things we love, even when our careers are so important. And I know you both love your careers and you're dedicated to the children that you service and the families you service, but still to just do something because it brings you joy. That is part of being human. That's part of reducing your stress. That by itself will reduce your stress, even if it's just a few minutes, can help you reduce your stress.
Wow. So, I was going to end the show by asking each of you to give advice to the Strictly Education audience. What advice would you give folk to decrease the stress, decrease the anxiety, and to focus on your physical health? And, I'll start with Piper. What would you say to other superintendents, Piper, as advice to decrease the stress, decrease the anxiety, focus on your mental, physical, emotional health? What advice might you give to a superintendent?
I would say, work is always here. And I say here because I'm in my office right now. Work is always here. Work is always all around the district, and work always follows you. However, you need to prioritize yourself and your home life, because you might have those close calls that Tahira and I have been talking about, and that's something you don't get back. You can prioritize at work where something might wait until tomorrow, or something might wait until next week. Not everything is an emergency, but your own person, your health, your family, those are always an emergency.
Wow, that's awesome. And that's great advice for me, Piper. Thank you, my friend.
Sure.
Dr. Aku, you've already given us so many little nuggets. What else might you say to the busy executives who are watching Strictly Education?
Well, would you mind if we do
The mental
a
health?
really short breathing exercise?
What do you think, Doc?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it,
I
Doc.
love
What do you
it.
think,
All right.
Piper?
I would love that.
Okay.
So you already mentioned breathing shallow, right? And that's how most of us breathe. We're aware of it if you do yoga, but most of us go around breathing shallow, kind of the top of our chest. It's belly breathing that turns off the fight, flight, and freeze and turns on the rest and digest system, which is the system that should be activated most of the time. So if you put one hand over your heart and one hand on your tummy, okay, and I'm going to ask everybody on their own to breathe in 4 times
Okay,
deeply.
Strictly Education audience, do the same.
So I want you to pay attention to how you feel now. Right? Where is stress? Is there stress anywhere in your body and your mind? And what you want to make sure you do is that this bottom hand, the one on your tummy, needs to go in and out. That's the hand you want to focus on as you're breathing in. When you fill up your lungs, your diaphragm has to move. And that's what gives space so your lungs can completely fill themselves. So everybody take 4 deep breaths. You want to try to make each breath a little slower and a little deeper than the last. And as you exhale, if you can release any tension in your body. You want to really make sure that bottom hand is the one that's moving. Okay. How does everybody feel?
Calm.
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 Right?
Better.
Better, calm. That is free. It doesn't take long. And the hands are just so that you're focusing on deep breathing.
Right.
But you don't need to put your hands on your body while you're doing that. You can do it anywhere,
Right.
anytime, no matter how crazy things are, no matter how much is going on, no matter how big the emergency. You can take 30 seconds to breathe in deeply 4 times. And if you do, you'll be able to think clearer. So you'll be able to deal with the emergency better.
Right.
And you will reduce your stress. After whatever events that are going crazy happen, you can do that even a little bit longer.
Sure.
So you can reduce your stress. You
Sure.
can add music to it. Like, there's so much you can add to it.
Yeah.
But just 4 deep breaths by themselves starts to turn off that fight, flight, and freeze system.
Sure.
And helps you regain your calm.
Sure. Oh, thank you so much. All right, Doc, talk to us.
Man, I would probably say stay physical, stay active.
Yeah, that's important.
And it could be as simple as just like go outside in the morning, like, before everybody wakes up, and just take a walk and just get connected with nature. You would be surprised how different you feel when you start your day. So just stay active.
I really love that
Yeah.
because I enjoy listening to the birds chirp first thing in the morning.
Yes.
It relaxes me. It brings peace. Something as simple as listening to the birds chirp in the morning.
Or even water, if you provide a body of water, just hearing, the nature. It's
research shows
Yes.
that we definitely calm when we are around nature. There's something grounding and calming about nature. Even simulated sounds can be helpful.
Right.
So, and you can find, again,
Yeah,
free,
there are apps. There are apps
there's
for it.
apps on YouTube. You can
Calm,
find,
that's another app.
you can find sounds of nature and play that in the background.
Sure.
It's something to help calm you even while you're doing other things.
Sure, sure. Very good. Well, I have to tell you, ladies, I thank each of the doctors on the show, the doctor of education, the doctor of psychology, the physical doctor, the doctor of medicine, right? And so I just thank you all for just bringing your superpower to Strictly Education, being a little vulnerable and sharing a bit of yourselves with all of us. You ladies are super amazing. And I just know that my audience appreciates your expertise, your experiences, and I just thank you so much for your time. I just hope that this episode is enlightening. I know it's been enlightening for me. Bringing my friend Piper on, bringing these two amazing ladies who are now part of my tribe, onto this show to talk to us about such an important topic of our mental, our physical, and our emotional health. Thank you so much for watching Strictly Education. Please remember to subscribe to the Creative Lounge to watch more episodes of Strictly Education, and we will see you next time. Thank you.